Thank you for being with us tonight. This meeting has been brought to you in part by
Let Grand Forks International Airport help you start your next vacation off on the right foot. Grand Forks International Airport offers flights to the sunny destinations of Orlando, Las Vegas, and Phoenix on Allegiant, and connections anywhere in the world through Minneapolis-St. Paul on Delta. Forget the hassle of long drives, parking nightmares, and stressful check-ins. The convenience of flying locally means less headaches and more time for you. Grand Forks International Airport, your airport, simply grand.
Know what's in this box? Well, in case your crystal ball is broken, here's a hint. Safe, reliable energy, for starters, but there's also a commitment to this community. See, at Xcel Energy, this is our hometown. So we're not just about making a living here, we're about living here. Oh, I wish I had wings. In our community, we're always delivering. Xcel Energy, responsible by nature.
Chris Young, live, Raised on Country Tour.
I was raised on country.
October 3rd, Alaris Center. Chris Young, hit after amazing hit.
And tonight I'm drowning.
With special guests, Eli Young Band and Matt Stell. Tickets on sale now at livenation.com or ticketmaster.com. Chris Young, Raised on Country Tour.
The City of Grand Forks, the proud home of University of North Dakota. City Council meeting Monday, September 16, 2019 is hereby called to order. Welcome and roll call.
Weigel.
Here.
Doppler. Katie, are you on the phone? Weber.
Here.
Mock. Here. Marshall. Here. Sandy.
Here.
Thank you. Dean.
Here.
Thank you. Have a quorum.
Thank you. Under 1.2 Mayor's announcements, it was a jam-packed weekend once again in Grand Forks. My thanks to all involved with potato bowl activities, especially the French fry feed and the parade, which brings thousands upon thousands of people together from around the region. Also a big congrats and well done to Coach Bubba and the UND football team. As you can see, the coloring of my jersey is a bit off today. Mayor Mahoney and I had a little wager on the game last weekend. Congrats to defending national champions, NDSU, for that win. 6-time or 7-time national champions. I think our team did pretty well. And I appreciate the friendly relationship with Mayor Mahoney and our Fargo friends. Wearing this is softened by UND's big win this weekend and the knowledge that we have a rematch hopefully soon. I also want to thank all involved with the State Special Olympics bocce ball and soccer tournament, which was an inspiring event at South Middle School. Also congrats to Rydell for another successful car show and demonstration of their generosity supporting the Grand Forks Education Foundation. Also coming up, we have ward meetings scheduled in the next week or so. Tomorrow is a meeting for Ward 5 and 6, and that will be at Schrader School from 5:30 to 7, and a meeting for Ward 7 next Tuesday at the Alaris Center starting at 6 p.m. This is Welcoming Week, and as a welcoming community, we're proud to be engaged with community partners and our longtime residents to welcome our newest of residents. Welcoming Week culminates with the Global Friends Community Picnic next Sunday at University Park, so I hope to see you there. Also, in the next couple of weeks, you can find even more great programming for the whole family at the Grand Forks Public. Used to be the Grand Forks Public Library, but we're having a shift. It's now at the Grand Forks Public. Local author Leif Inger will be at the Empire on September 27th, and the Dueling Pianos will be playing at a fundraiser for the library on September 28th. So welcome to everyone. Item 2, awards, presentations, appointments, and proclamations. 2.1.
Employee recognition.
Bill Mackey, 25 years with the police department. Jason Kaiser, 10 years with the police department. Molly Merrick, 5 years for 911. And Christy Slominski, 5 years with Dial-A-Ride. And the September recognitions are Brandon Bartholomew, 45 years with engineering. Linda Coots, 20 years with finance. Ben Devlin, 15 years with the bus. Andrew Knudsen, 5 years with wastewater. And Micah Brown, 5 years with Dial-A-Ride. So with that, let's give them a hand and thank them. Item 3, public hearings and second reading of ordinances. 3.1.
Public hearing and second reading of ordinance relating to the 2020 budget, including the salary plan and adoption of resolution establishing 2020 fees.
So I'll open the public hearing on 3.1. We'll close the public hearing on 3.1. Ms. Dorstad?
Mayor Brown, members of council, we presented the 2020 budget in two parts this year, both on July 15th and July 22nd, including the salary plan. Material was submitted to you at that time, which you gave preliminary approval to on August 5th. No changes have been made to the budget since that time. Unless there is any further changes or discussion tonight, what we would ask from you is for final approval of the 2020 budget, approval of the salary plan, and also approval of the resolution establishing the fees for 2020.
So council action on 3.1. Ms. Marshall motions to approve. Mr. Weigel seconds. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carries. Thank you. 3.2.
Public hearing and second reading of ordinance to dedicate right-of-way on the replat of Lot 22, Block 1, Southern Estates, 12th edition.
Open the public hearing on 3.2. Close the public hearing on 3.2. Mr. Gangler?
Mayor Brown, members of the council, I'll kind of go over the more recent history of the request. The air photo you see on the screen is bound by 40th Avenue south to the north, and then just past 45th Avenue. What you see in blue, it represents a cul-de-sac that was proposed to align with 43rd Avenue. So back, the Planning and Zoning Commission, when the plat was brought to them, they approved the plat without the dedicated stretch of 41st, just to revert it, or 43rd, and then basically a lot line would split those two lots. Then it got brought back to the city council, where the city council approved the right-of-way to go back in for a public street. Now, more recently, at the last Planning and Zoning Commission, they reaffirmed their initial motion to not have it be a dedicated public street. Thereby, it would just revert to a private street. Based on the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation.
Thank you. Mr. Sandy?
Hey, Mr. Mayor, a lot of work has gone into this by the planning department, engineering department, a lot of work and a lot of neighborhood meetings, a lot of discussions with the developers and others. I think after talking with at least, well, one other council member and both the engineering and the planning department, I'm of the opinion that we should move the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation forward. I believe it's best for the neighborhood as well as it makes the most sense for the city of Grand Forks, so I'll make that motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Mr. Weber seconds. Further discussion from council?
Oh.
Ms. Mock?
Brad, do you know what this street was originally planned to be before we got into all the discussions on whether it should go through or not? Was it originally planned to be a public street, or was it originally planned to be private?
Right, the original PUD from a number of years ago did show 43rd going all the way through. And that was probably dating back to maybe 95 or 96. Of course, it sat for a number of years with no development interest, and then when this development came out, that's when it became a discussion item.
Thank you. Further comment, Mr. Gangler?
If we could, Mr. Morris is here on behalf of the developing team. If he would be able to say a few comments.
Please, welcome.
Thank you, Austin Morris, Enclave Development. I provided a brief history at the last City Commission meeting, and I did as well at the Planning Commission meeting, but thank you for hearing me out here. So the SoCo has been planned now to be a mixed-use office retail environment along Columbia, and it's been in plans for a year and a half now. So we embarked on that effort a little over a year and a half ago and master planned the entire site to feature over $30 million of office and retail mix. And through that effort, we learned 43rd for us and for this development was always an important factor. Having 43rd be designated 43rd and be a public street. Initially, the goal was to have 43rd to go through. Now, 43rd would have helped with some of the connectivity with the neighborhood, would have helped with some traffic easing, would have allowed pedestrian connectivity with the neighborhood, and we were for it. But in light of 2 different neighborhood meetings, we wanted to accommodate the neighborhood with 43rd not going through. They were adamant that traffic flow would inhibit and be a detractor to their neighborhood. So we made that accommodation over the last 9 months and got their buy-in for the whole development. We also initiated at the request of the city a traffic study to determine traffic as a result of this development and what it would look like in the future. And 43rd met the warrants necessary to have a signalized intersection. So 43rd was always planned to be a through street, always planned to be an avenue for the city, and it broke up these 2 tracts of land in a manner that allowed satisfactory development on both sides. We also got public works, engineering, and planning staff's recommendation as we went through this, and kind of surprised by this because it seems like it has planning staff support, engineering support, public works support, because with that traffic light there, the city ends up being able to control and have control over certain traffic easing measures, what we build there as a city street or what the city ends up doing there. They have more management of the turn lane and future traffic light management. And those factors I think are really important to service this development in a way that makes it happen rather than makes it go away. We're also dealing with the Magellan Pipeline. So the Magellan Pipeline runs along South Columbia here. And Magellan, through our site planning on the proposed office just south of 43rd, won't let us do anything within their pipeline. I mean, we can pave up to the easement area. We can pave only asphalt, but nobody can park on it. Thus, this 43rd becoming a private street would prevent us from developing it. We can't have access over Magellan's easement with the constructability constraints they're putting on us. Whereas the city has an existing recorded easement that allows constructability of a street over the easement accessing the property. So those are things that end up being crucial to this development happening, period. And I'm surprised that it wouldn't be a city street, because it's not like we aren't paying for it in the end. I mean, in the end, we pay for it via special assessments. The tenants, the owners of the property pay for that street. So it is crucial that this remain a city street for this development to continue.
Okay, thank you. Further comments, Ms. Marshall?
Yes, I think between, the comments that you've just made, and thank you for them, and the comments made by city staff at the last meeting where we discussed this, there's really a compelling reason, or a number of compelling reasons to make this a city street. And so I have 2 questions. Does it make any difference to the neighbors in the area whether this is a city street or not a city street, given the fact that it's not going to be a through street?
Mr. Gangler?
Oh, to the best of my knowledge, I'm not sure why anybody living east of this area would be concerned whether it is public or private, just from the terms of any impacts on the neighborhood.
Right, yeah. So the neighborhood has already accomplished what they wanted in not having it be a city street. So I'm understanding the motion on the table would be to accept the proposal from the Planning and Zoning Commission and make this a private road rather than a city street. Personally, I think that would be a bad idea.
Mayor Brown.
Yes, Mr. Weigel.
Al, if I recall correctly, when you spoke last week or whenever it was, I believe you said something along the lines of that we wouldn't have any more access than the private developer would for an easement over that. Is that correct?
Mr. Grasser.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Weigel. That is my assumption at this point in time. The regulations, we have an existing agreement with the pipeline. I'm hesitating a little bit because I don't know if I want to jump into the weeds. I'll try to keep it real simple. My interpretation, they treat a longitudinal encroachment differently than a crossing. Okay, they put much higher, more stringent requirements on a longitudinal encroachment, which gets into, I think, where the development is at. Now, whether the road crossing is private or public, I'm not sure that there will be any difference in how they'll treat it. That is an unknown at this point in time, but I'm not saying it's a given one way or the other. I think it's a matter of how they're going to process the permit application. It seems like they've gotten tougher on their criteria over the last year or two. So again, I can't say definitively one way or the other, but I don't think it's a given that the city is going to have a lot better success than a private.
So essentially, we could move this forward how the motion is currently. They could apply for that, and if they were not to get access to an easement, it essentially could come back and we could go back to the drawing board at that point. So we could proceed with what we have now. If it doesn't work for them, then we can cross that bridge when we get to it.
That could be one possible route. Again, my hesitation, unless we may have to get involved in how they actually apply for the permit to make sure they're applying for it. I think they have to basically separate, I think, the rest of the private development from the crossing. Again, that's just my opinion without being a technical expert in that particular area.
Or we could have the crossing as public and the rest of the road at some point could be private. Could we do something along those lines?
Could even do that.
Okay.
Mr. Swan.
Mayor?
Yes.
This is Ken. Can I make a few comments?
Please, Mr. Vian.
Yeah. So I looked at this thing a couple different ways, especially since we met and talked about this at our last council meeting. And I thought the presentation by the developer was pretty compelling today. You know, the staff earlier had said historically what happens is these start out at private streets, they end up being public streets. We've done that many times in the past, and so the recommendation that it stay, that it be a public street now and keep it that way, I guess now, as I think about it, makes very good sense that we would do that. Because as a private street, then you've got people on both sides. You're never for sure who's actually going to maintain the street. Is there going to be an agreement, I guess, amongst them? Is a contractor going to come in and do that? How is that going to be available to service them? So it gives a little bit more security that the street will be maintained. The city will do it, especially as a signalized intersection. And the issue that they're having with the paving, I'd like not to hold up the developer and what's going on and move this along. Also in the past, this would be something I'd have to have a little more information, but I understood the city streets or private streets weren't necessarily allowed to have curb and gutter access, that they would be more of an alley type of an access in the right of way as you connect to the Columbia Road. And I don't know, for a whole host of reasons, it just seems to make good sense to put it in as a public street, maintain it as a public street, and do it right up front. So that's my recommendation on this.
Thank you, Mr. Vian. Mr. Swanson.
Mr. Mayor, when Mr. Swanson's done, could I say a few words, please?
Yes, Mr. Sandy.
Mayor Brown, members of council, just so you're aware of the procedure here. At your earlier meeting, you actually introduced and gave preliminary approval to an ordinance amending the street and highway plan that would have this particular street as a public street. The motion by Mr. Sandy changes that portion. That will be treated as an amendment. So you would vote on that portion which is the recommendation for planning and zoning as an amendment. Depending upon the outcome of that vote, you would then vote on the main motion, whether as amended or not amended, for final approval. Because it is a plat approval, it only requires a majority vote. This does not include the zoning. If it were including the zoning, it would require a minimum of 5-member votes. But in this case, it would only take a majority vote.
Thank you, Mr. Sandy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to second Mr. Veen's and Ms. Marshall's comments. They both made very logical arguments about why this piece of property should maintain or should be put in as a public road. The reason that I'm going along with planning and zoning, and the reason that I personally think that it should be a private road, is because that road itself only serves the commercial property, and I understand that at one point the request was for the road to go through, but as it sits today, the road isn't going through, and I question what's the purpose of actually putting in a road with a cul-de-sac. As a taxpayer, I look at that whole commercial development, and I see no purpose for a road there at all, let alone the city paying to put a road all the way back to a cul-de-sac, which of course, anyone that's in engineering can tell you a cul-de-sac is the most expensive road to build. In my opinion, they should go and redesign that whole commercial property and get rid of the road. There's nothing wrong with having the stoplight there and to have nice, easy in and out access, but just because they engineered to put a road there doesn't mean that the city should put a road there just because they're saying we've already done the engineering on it. It makes no sense to me. In my opinion, just because they've engineered a road doesn't mean that we should say, well, let's pay for the road. I believe if they were smart, they would go back and re-engineer the whole thing and try to get some additional commercial property out of that. And instead of making it $30 million, put in $40 million worth of commercial property. My opinion, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Further comments?
Yeah, so the road ends up being important for a number of factors. One is wayfinding. We're leasing commercial and retail space for development, and it's abnormal to have essentially 5 blocks, 5 avenues, and develop the entire thing with private in and out access. The other item is a signalized intersection on a private road, I think is confusing. And the third comment I'd make is that I guess I'm a little confused because special assessments would pay for it, and the special assessments would be paid for by the benefiting parties, which would be both sides of this road, which are owned by this development. So we would be paying for it. The reality is that from a maintenance standpoint, and Al Grasser mentioned this at a prior meeting, is the maintenance of it would be assessed in the future at some point in time for repairs and maintenance based on city policy. The snow removal, did my mic go out? Oh no. The snow removal would be completed by the city so that it's not confusing for people on why snow isn't removed to the standard that the city does it. And Al mentioned that they already get phone calls on private roads. Why haven't you done the streets yet? Why haven't you maintained this? The other thing that I look at is you have $30 million of development. If that tax base in this amount of density over this quantity of land doesn't more than pay for the snow removal, I'd be extraordinarily surprised.
Thank you. So who seconded Mr. Sandy's motion? Mr. Weber did. So we have Mr. Sandy's motion as seconded by Mr. Weber for a vote. Ms. Mock, do you wish to speak? Or?
When I watched the planning and zoning meeting, it seemed like they didn't discuss the pipeline issue very much. And I thought when we had that discussion before, part of the issue was the pipeline would potentially dictate asphalt over that section of road. So typically we might require a developer to put in concrete, but in this case, the limiting factor may be the pipeline. Is that part? Because I feel like when I watched the planning and zoning meeting, that part was missing from the discussion. And so I don't know if they would have, perhaps they would have voted the same way, but that seems to be a new element that wasn't as discussed in planning and zoning.
Mr. Grasser.
Again, thank you, and I'm not sure I can give you a definitive answer, but the permitting requirements on the pipeline easement does mention asphalt only. As a city component, we may end up having to meet those same requirements. That's what I'm saying. I don't know until we actually get into the permit application and they start processing what we propose. I don't know the answer to that, but there is definitely an interpretation. And again, you can start dissecting the words that are in this agreement and the permit. It depends how they're going to interpret a couple of the words in there. And I'm just not in a position to be able to say how they're going to make their final interpretation. So we could potentially both have to meet the asphalt requirements. Potentially the city might be able to get by with the concrete. Potentially the developer might, again, but I think it would be critical to separate that from the rest of the site development approvals. If you look at the site plan, they've got a lot of access roads and stuff going again. So the pipeline is treating that, I think, as a longitudinal encroachment or use as opposed to a crossing. And they apply higher standards to the longitudinal encroachment than they do on a crossing.
Mr. Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
If I can, I'm going to wear you guys out. I apologize, but I just want it known, and I've never done this. I've never said this to a city council ever in 8 years. If we don't get this public access, this project is done. I mean, it doesn't make sense. I've never done that in 8 years. So that's why I'm just confused at, the road's paid for by us. It just happens to be bonded by special assessments. I mean, this is a wonderful development that we're going to develop all the way to 40th, and the challenge is a small road. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Weber.
I've been going back and forth on this for a few weeks now. In fact, the last time this came before this group, I seconded the motion to keep it as a public road. And now I seconded a motion to make it a private road. As council, we have two different advisory bodies on a decision like this. We have city staff that we count on for their expertise. We have the Planning and Zoning Committee, a group of volunteers who give their time to look at these issues and to make recommendations to us. And those two entities are in direct contradiction with one another. So I've not been sure where I was going to go. And then I heard Mr. Grasser say, well, basically this comes down to a policy decision. And it's up to you folks. You need to make this decision. So I came in tonight ready to make a decision, and then I'm hearing something, I believe for the first time tonight, that the pipeline is changing all of this. Now, last week, I asked that this be brought forward last week so that I could have a final week to mull over what my decision should be. And last week, I do not recall any mention of the pipeline being the deciding factor. And now tonight I'm hearing, not only is it the deciding factor, but if we don't vote the right way, this whole development is to be killed. Now, I'm always supportive of development. I try to support this idea that Grand Forks is open for business. But why should we be paying, why should the city pay for a road that's on private development here? Now I'm hearing something else, and I see Mr. Grasser would like to say something. Help me understand this further, Mr. Grasser, because I thought I also heard you say that even if this were a public road, it's possible that the pipeline would not allow us to cross that there's a lot of unknowns here. Did I misunderstand that?
Mr. Grasser.
Unfortunately, no, you didn't misunderstand it, and I'm apologetic and uncomfortable. I can't give you definitive answers on some of those items. I think it's a matter of considering the risks. I will note that, 45th Avenue South, we did build that with concrete, and we did get permission from the pipeline to do that particular roadway in concrete. The reason I'm hesitant to say with assurance that that will apply to 43rd is, again, it just feels like there's a bit of a changing of interpretation on the pipeline level. Having said that, if you're evaluating your risks, and I can't tell you the percentage, but the city probably does have a bit of an edge up on trying to get some concrete in there. Again, I'm not giving you anything factual, which makes me very uncomfortable. I'm trying to keep my comments as factual as I can, but it's really a matter of evaluating some of those risks.
Mr. Grasser?
Mr. Vian?
Say, Mr. Grasser, the city, I thought I heard you earlier say the city has the dedicated right-of-way and the ability to put in a public street. There's a certain portion of that public street that is perpendicular or whatever to the pipeline easement. And within that easement, we built streets with asphalt or concrete. You could do that. And this isn't going to stop us from building a street. If the whole thing is asphalt, we've got many asphalt streets. We've got concrete streets. Concrete is the preferred. But either way, we, as in the city, can build the street and operate and maintain it as we do other streets in town, and takes away the uncertainty that the developer has and what type of means he can have for building the street. Is that right?
Mr. Grasser.
Yes, I believe that would be correct. Again, the advantage the city might have in applying for a permit is we wouldn't be confused with, again, a longitudinal versus a transverse type encroachment. The pipeline can only dictate what's going on within their easement. And so, again, a possibility could be that we build asphalt through the easement and we build concrete for the rest of it. Again, they can't dictate what that entire street will look like. I don't know if a number of different points were brought up relative to the visibility of the street and the long-term operation and maintenance, but I don't want to regurgitate any of those. I'm not the expert in some of those areas, but.
So now we have Mr. Sandy's motion to amend before us. Any further discussion? If not, we'll do a roll call vote.
Okay, as Mayor Brown said, this is to vote for Sandy's motion, which amends what council did at the previous meeting. Weigel?
Yes.
Schneider? Or, sorry, I have a whole list here. That's all. Duckler? Weber?
Yes.
Mock? No. Marshall?
No.
Veen?
No.
And Sandy?
Sure, why not?
So we have a tie.
So we have a tie.
And Mayor Brown?
Okay, it comes to me. So if we pass Mr. Sandy's amendment, then this deal is dead?
Yes.
Is that what you're telling me? And we're open for business? So I vote
That would be no.
no.
Okay, motion fails.
Okay, so now we have the previous motion before us.
Okay.
Roll call vote.
All right, Weigel?
No.
For clarification, what we're currently voting on is to support the development.
Yes.
Okay, I'd like
To
to
the-
change my vote.
For the dedicated street.
The whole development with the dedicated street, yes.
Okay, Mr. Weigel.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Weber?
Yes.
Mock? Marshall?
Yes.
Veen?
Yes.
And Sandy?
Absolutely.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you. And now on item 4. Who would like action items pulled for discussion? I will pull 4.3 and 4.8. Who would like other action items pulled for discussion?
4-9, Mayor.
4.9 is Mr. Weigel. So that leaves 4.1, 4.2, 4.4, 4.5, 4.6, 4.7, 4.10, 4.11, 4.12, 4.13, 4.14, 4.15. Need a motion and a second. Ms. Marshall, motion, Mr. Weber, seconds. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Carries. Thank you. 4.3.
Public Works Operations, approval of bids, construction services, consultant agreement, reimbursement resolution, and budget amendments for Project 8030.
Public Works Director, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Brown, members of the council. This item was presented at the Committee of the Whole, and at that time, the recommendation on this project was to award bids on Schedule A. And at that time, staff believed that there were some irregularities in the bids. And so upon consultation with Howard Swanson and also back with our consultants to make sure that we were on the right track here, it appears that the Schedule B is the lowest and best bid, and those are the individual bids by the general and the electrical and mechanical bids. And so to amend the staff recommended action tonight, what we're requesting is that you approve the construction bids and award bid to ICS in the amount of $3,031,600 and the electrical to Fusion Automation in the amount of $335,029. And the mechanical to CL Linfoot in the amount of $97,464. And so I believe we've cleared up what we thought were irregularities, and in consultation with Howard Swanson, I think we're okay to accept the lowest and best bid, which is Schedule B.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Amundson? Mr. Weigel, motions approved. Ms. Mock, seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed, carries. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
And then now 4.8.
Request from ISSHC LLC Integrated Steel Solutions for a 5-year pilot, which is payment in lieu of tax.
Mr. Brooks.
I just wanted to update you on the staff report that we're just setting the public hearing for October 21st as the date to hold that public hearing. So that's just the amended motion from staff.
Thank you. Mr. Weber, motions. Mr. Weigel, seconds. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Carries. Thank you. 4.9.
Syringe Service Program.
Mr. Weigel.
Thank you, Mayor. We had a little discussion last week in regards to if somebody brings in one needle to get exchanged, that how many they could get back in return, and I believe that number was 5, correct?
10.
Up to 10. So if they bring in one, they can get 10 needles.
Correct.
I'm not a big fan of that. I'm very supportive of the program. I think it's important. I think it gives an opportunity for public health to be able to get in, talk with people who are facing addiction, and hopefully connect them with services to help them in the long run. But I'm not in favor of providing somebody 10 needles to the one they turn in. So thank you for the program. I think it's great, but I will be voting against that.
But that's 10 clean needles. Mr. Dulitz, your comments, your thoughts?
For clients coming into the program, they'd only have to bring back in one syringe to receive up to 10 clean syringes or new syringes, and then that would just be based on the number that they bring back. Of course, we always have a chance to negotiate with the client and use motivational interviewing skills, things like that, to help motivate the client to actually come back and bring more of their syringes back. We just don't want to be denying people an opportunity to receive services because of because they only had one syringe available, or they had syringes confiscated or something like that. Our goal is to not turn anyone away, because we know that has its own set of consequences as well.
Can we lower that number to 5 or to 3 or something along those lines? Like I said, I'm supportive of the program, want to see it go forward, but I also don't want to see 10 dirty needles or 9 dirty needles going out there, and then we come back to the next week, and now we have 18 dirty needles, and the process continues going.
So if we went to 5, then that client would have to come back probably in 2 to 3 days for more syringes. That potentially wouldn't even get them through a weekend, depending on what their current use pattern is. So 5 would be difficult. The other thing that makes 5 difficult is some syringes come in 10 packs, and so sometimes it's easier to give a client a bag of syringes in the normal 10 pack versus having to break it apart and count them out. That's one of the reasons why we opted to go with the 10, 20, and 30.
Thank you. Further comments, Mr. Weber?
Move approval.
Mr.
The
Motion,
program is
Mr. Weber, and then do I get a second, Ms. Marshall, and then Ms. Mock?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
If I
Mr.
may?
Bean.
I have to,
Sandy.
I was pretty apprehensive on this when we were talking about it last week. I have several questions about, are we tracking people? Are we going to be following up? I do believe that our public health will be following and tracking people. But again, I prefer the walk to before run concept. And I recognize that opening a bag of syringes and counting out 5 might be, not as easy as just grabbing a bag of 10 and handing them out. But I have to agree with Mr. Weigel. As somebody that's on the front line dealing with people that are using opioids and using drugs, often I believe that his opinion is valid based upon his life experience. And so I will agree with him, and I will not be supporting a syringe program where we return 10 to 1.
Thank you. Ms. Mock, comments?
Could you just explain how you come to those numbers? I mean, this is a CDC recommended practice. I'm sure that you've got different references that you source in order to come to such a number. Can you just explain how that?
So according to the CDC, the best practice is actually a needs-based program. So you provide the means for someone to return their used syringes. You provide them the Sharps container that they can put their used syringes in, and then you provide based on what their need is and what your program's capacity is. So if you only have funding for X number of syringes per client, then that's all you have funding for. But the best practice is to provide based on need. The next most common that you see in the United States is the 1-for-1 plus model, and that's what the programs in Mandan, Minot, and Valley City operate under. And so we based our numbers off of what they had put together for their program, partially, and then looking at other programs throughout the country. The 1-for-1 model, so you bring back one syringe, you get one new syringe. That model is getting pretty antiquated as far as what you're seeing in state laws and things like that. Not a lot of programs that you see are operate under that 1-for-1 model anymore.
Thank you, Ms. Mock.
They can return 1 needle and get up to 10. Do they automatically get 10, or is that something that comes through the visit and the staffing working with that person?
It would be up to 10.
So it's not a guaranteed 10?
Correct.
Okay.
A reason, for instance, a person may be needing to use the syringe service program, maybe for things like hormone injections or something like that, where they may end up needing less than 10 syringes, or it's something that they're injecting less frequently, but they have access to the hormone but not the syringes, for instance. That's been something that's been seen in other programs throughout the country. So that would be one example of where they may need less than 10, or based on their use pattern, they may need less than 10, for instance.
And the point of this is somewhat to help people where they're at. So if they're still using, you meet them where they are, and then hopefully get them to change long-term.
Correct. The goal is any positive change, and when you add up a lot of little changes, that can amount to a lot.
And then one last question, is there a way for people to drop use syringes so they're not just on the street, but they could drop them without staffing being present? Is there some sort of depository? Could we do something like that?
So what we would hope to write into a grant would be a community syringe drop box. For instance, in Mandan, they set that up for individuals who are outside of their program that have need to drop syringes. I just don't have a good estimate on what it would cost to install it. I know to buy one, it would be between $900 and $1,500, and then it's just the cost to install that we'd have to factor in.
Okay.
Thank you for your comment.
Question, Mayor?
Yes.
If you're saying best practice is 10 syringes, where does this best practice come from? Is that kind of a national standard, a regional standard, a state standard? Where does this best practice come from?
As a correction, the best practice is needs-based, not what we're proposing, and what would be the 10 syringes would be the 1-for-1 plus. And that actually came from the CDC. The CDC has made it a point in probably about the last 6 months to put out some good guidelines as in respect to syringe service programs, which is something they haven't really been entering into very much in the past.
So are there some needs-based that go above 10 syringes?
Yes. Fargo would be the closest example.
What do they do in Fargo?
They provide syringes based on need. For instance, there's individuals from outside of the Fargo area that do things like secondary exchange, so they have people in their community that they know they have a need, and so one person will come to Fargo, pick up the injecting equipment based on the need and bring it back and distribute it, and then bring back the used syringes to Fargo. That's the way that their program has operated since the program started.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Sandy.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt Mr. Veen, but I was just going to comment that, and Michael, thank you so much for all you've done, and all you obviously have a very big heart and want to help people, and I really appreciate that. A lot of what you've talked about has centered around wanting to give people access to service providers and let us know who's using and stay on top of things. And I just feel that, although, again, your 10 syringe concept seems to make sense based upon they come in a pack of 10, 5 syringes will get them in front of you twice as often. And I believe that that's the purpose, is to have that direct contact. And the more contact we have with the people that are using, the more likely we're going to be able to help them. So I still think 10 is too many. I'd much prefer to see it cut down to 5. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I learned in geology that people in water take paths of least resistance. So if it's 5 syringes, they're not going to come in to change 5. They're going to more likely reuse, which causes our problem. So that's my opinion on that. Mr. Weber.
Just, it's my understanding that 2 of the main priorities here are to bring people in if they're ready for services, to get them at that point, but also disease prevention.
Yes.
And that's another reason for the numbers that you're describing. Disease prevention is a really important part of this, which I don't think we have discussed so much.
Yes, as I've been talking about this, our number 1 goal is to reduce the prevalence of infectious disease related to injection drug use, and number 2 is to provide positive connections for individuals who may be using substances. Our goal is to stay in contact with individuals, meet them where they're at, and help them to achieve their goals, while also kind of keeping our community goals in mind. If we put too many limits on it, that discourages them from coming, and that increases the chance of reuse, as the mayor alluded to. So that's why it's been this kind of balance back and forth on figuring out how we can best serve the client to keep them coming into us, yet still maintaining frequent contact with them to help promote positive change.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I think we're ready for a roll call vote, and it's their 1 for 10 exchange program.
Yes, and what I am asking for is concurrence with the department's decision to operate the program.
Thank you.
All right, Weigel?
No.
Weber?
Yes.
Mock? Marshall?
Yes.
Bean?
Yes.
And Sandy?
I would vote yes if it were a 5-1, but in this situation, I'm going to vote no, although I'm a big fan of the program, and thank you, Michael, for everything you've done.
Mayor, I am on the line.
Oh,
This is
Dockler is-
Katie,
okay.
and I would vote yes.
Okay, thank you, Katie.
So motion passes. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
I now need introduction to ordinance on 4-7, 4-11, 4-12, 4-13, 4-14, 4-15. Mr. Weigel sponsors that. Thank you very much. Item 5, informational items, 5-1.
Statement of changes in cash balance as of May 31st,
5-2.
and the investment portfolio as of August 31st.
Item 6, public comments. Does anyone wish to address the community or the council? Seeing none. Item 7, approve of the minutes and bills, 7-1.
The vendor list and engineer's estimate as presented.
Need a motion, a second to pay the bills. Mr. Weber motion, Mr. Weigel seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. And then item 7.2,
We have the minutes from May 6th and 20th, June 3rd and 17th, and July 1st.
need a motion to approve the minutes. Mr. Weber motions.
It's unusual for us to be approving so many all at once. We had some catch-up to do, and we're in good shape now.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
Very good. I'll move approval.
Need a second. Mr. Weigel, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Thank you. Item 8, city administrator comments. Mr. Phelan.
Mayor Brown, thanks
Welcome.
for your 2020 budget, and it's great working with you, and you empower us so much to do great things. So number one, we appreciate you. We appreciate a supportive council, and we don't take it for granted, because in my history here, it always hasn't been this terrific. So thank you very much for all that you do, and on a silent night with a budget like this, that's a pretty extraordinary, so thanks. And I want to also thank all the city departments that have worked hard and long on this and worked with us as part of the administration. And so when things kind of go really well at the end, it's because oftentimes a lot of work goes on behind the scenes so that there's less angst at the end. So a lot of work went on. And really with this budget, on September 30th, on Monday, we're planning a strategic priority session, or as the mayor calls it, some strategery. And so we're going to do all that over at the Grand Forks Herald Building. And number one, we're going to talk about updating you on some of our priorities that we've been working on, provide some updates on that. But also important to that is this budget really is just a function of trying to deliver services to the city, citizens of Grand Forks and the greater region sometimes. So we'll have some updates on what we're going to do with this budget and move forward with some priorities in 2020 from some of your departments. And as you know, the foundation is built in this community by public safety, public works and water functions, public health, and community and economic development. So we'll have some updates on what 2020 means and maybe some things beyond that, so you can get a flavor of, we've approved some line items, but really that's a function of trying to deliver services. So we'll try to do that in the 30th. So we got some work to do on that. And on that, Ms. Marshall, you won't be there, but we'll meet with you beforehand, kind of give you a primer, get us schooled up a little bit, and then we can share your thoughts on the 30th as part of you, with your colleagues, okay? The other meeting that's coming up on October 1st, that would be on that Tuesday at 5:30, is a city-county meeting, and that's going to be centered on the Grand Forks Air Force Base, get an update. We have a new colonel that's leading the base, that's Colonel Pringle. He's going to be there with, he maybe some of his top staff to give an update, and we'll also have some consultants in town to talk about some strategies that we're working on. So that'll be the Monday and Tuesday, 30th and the 1st, that's coming up. We're going to hold off on some couple other dates. We were going to plan a city-school district joint meeting. I think that was going to be in early October. Right now, the school district's doing some master planning, and they're doing some community outreach. They're doing a lot of meetings. So their September is kind of booked up. And so I'm going to look at some date between October and maybe some time in November. And at that point, they'll have had their public meetings, So we'll come together there, and we're going to kind of talk about school resource officers. We're going to talk about behavioral health things that we're partnering on, and finally maybe some growth and development discussions along with some demography that they're working on. So we'll hold that a little bit on that one. The other one we're going to hold in, just because Councilmember Marshall, you're a key party on the City Public Library Working Group. We're going to hold a little bit on that too. And that'll allow us, you to be also in that room, and we can work on some strategies. In that meeting, we're going to talk about, there's some really, we should have Wendy Wendt give an update at some point. There she is right there. They're doing some terrific things at the library, upgrading it. And I think they're doing quite a bit more this year, so it'll be nice to hear an update on that. And also probably to the broader city council, some exciting things going on. We'll probably talk about the Grand Forks Hero Building and how the library fits in there. And then finally, there's some master plan that's going on in that neighborhood too. So we'll hold off on that. I'll send an email so everyone's up to school on things. Finally, thank you for all that you do. Have a great night.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Item 9 is mayor and council member comments. Councilman Weigel.
No, thank you, Mayor.
Councilwoman Dockler.
Yes, I would like to invite everyone in the community to the community picnic on this coming Sunday, the 22nd, from 5 to 7 p.m. at University Park. It's a wonderful event that you can go out and get to meet some of the neighbors in your community. There's going to be free food, music, games. The UND International Organization is co-sponsoring it this year, and I know that they would just love to see everyone come out and have a good time.
Well, thank you very much. Councilman Weber.
Thanks for that notice, Representative Dockler. I look forward to seeing you on Sunday.
Yep. And then Councilwoman Mock. Councilwoman Marshall.
Just a reminder that there is a Ward 5 and 6 meeting tomorrow night at 5:30 till 7 at Schrader Junior High.
Councilman Vian.
Yeah, I'd just like to, I want to also have a ward meeting. It looks like that will be on Tuesday, September 24th at the Alara Center.
Thank you. And Council President Sandy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was a very good meeting. I appreciate all the comments.
Well, thank you very much. Under employee recognition for August, Bill Mackey, 25 years police, Jason Kaiser, 10 years with the police, Molly Merrick, 5 years with 911, Christy Slominski, 5 years dial-a-ride. September's recognition includes Brandon Bartholomew, 45 years with engineering, Linda Kuntz, 20 years with finance, Ben Devlin, 15 years with bus, Andrew Knudsen, 5 years with wastewater, and Makia Brown, 5 years with dial-a-ride. Also, what a tremendous Potato Bowl weekend. Thanks to everyone who made the French fry feed and parade and the football game such a success. Congratulations to Coach Bubba on their win. And as you see, I'm wearing a jersey because we lost our wager with Mayor Mahoney, but I'm a Fighting Hawk Forever fan. So this is softened by our big win on Saturday. Also, ward meetings as mentioned, and Grand Forks Public has some great events coming up. Author Lee Weinger will be at the Empire 27th and dueling panels on the 28th. So thank you, Wendy, for that. With that, we take a motion to adjourn. Ms. Marshall quickly motions to adjourn. Mr. Weber seconds. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, we stand adjourned. Thank you. Alice.
Thank you for being with us tonight. This meeting has been brought to you in part by
Let Grand Forks International Airport help you start your next vacation off on the right foot. Grand Forks International Airport offers flights to the sunny destinations of Orlando, Las Vegas, and Phoenix on Allegiant, and connections anywhere in the world through Minneapolis-St. Paul on Delta. Forget the hassle of long drives, parking nightmares, and stressful check-ins. The convenience of flying locally means less headaches and more time for you. Grand Forks International Airport, your airport, simply grand.
Know what's in this box? Well, in case your crystal ball is broken, here's a hint. Safe, reliable energy, for starters, but there's also a commitment to this community. See, at Excel Energy, this is our hometown. So we're not just about making a living here, we're about living here. Oh, I wish I had wings.
In our community, we're always delivering. Excel Energy, responsible by nature.
Chris Young, live, Raised on Country Tour. I was raised on country. October 3rd, Alaris Center. Chris Young, hit after amazing hit. And tonight I'm drowning. With special guests, Eli Young Band and Matt Stell. Tickets on sale now at livenation.com or ticketmaster.com. Chris Young, Raised on Country Tour.